Welcome back to some Ratchet Clank, guys. For this video, I'd like to go over the story of the new game a bit more. Okay, didn't I already go over the story in the review? Yes, I did. But what I did during that video is compare the two, what the original felt like compared to the new one. But that's pretty much what I did. Now, in the end of that video, I mentioned something a bit vague. Well, it's a bit vague for me, that's what I think. I said that the game has a great overall story. What exactly did I mean by great overall story? Look, I enjoyed the idea of Ratchet becoming a Galactic Ranger. That's what I meant. However, the way the story was delivered in the game felt too rushed. Now, I didn't mention this in the video. I didn't want the review to be way too long, like over 35 minutes. So then I decided, why not, I'll just make this a separate video. Since the game is a reimagining, we got a bunch of new characters. That's cool, alright. But how can I say this? If you were to take away the Galactic Rangers from the game would have felt the same. I don't know if you guys agree with me. We had like 2 missions with Cora. That's pretty much it. We had Cora and Ratchet on planet Batalia and Quartu. Alaris was basically just talking in the background. Brax, we only had like 2 cutscenes, one in-game and 1 movie cutscene. He also appeared during the Mrs. Zircon boss battle in the beginning for a very brief moment. But overall, the characters, the Galactic Rangers I mean, were just talking in the background. I felt like Cora was the most involved in the game. We had Batalia, we had Quartu, we had a movie cutscene, well 2 movie cutscenes, and that's a lot more screen time compared to the other Galactic Rangers. Now I don't know if all of you saw the movie, but I enjoyed the film, I liked the story, but the way it was presented in the game felt too out of place, too rushed. Now for people who aren't that familiar with the series, okay, they might enjoy the story, they might think it's alright, but for hardcore fans and people who are very familiar with the series might believe that the story was way too rushed. Plus, if you haven't watched the movie, then all I'm saying is, the story doesn't feel the same. Okay, it follows the plot, but the game focused way too much on gameplay. The gameplay's pretty great, no doubt, but the story was kinda left out. Does this have to do with the fact that Insomniac Games spent 10 months to develop this game? It feels like they focused only on gameplay for 10 months, and then they decided to squeeze in the story as much as they could. Like I said in my review, the in-game cutscenes felt empty, so lifeless. We only had the characters standing there and moving their heads. And to compensate that, Insomniac Games just decided to put in movie cutscenes in the game. I know the game is following the movie's plot, but it just didn't really flow that well in the game. And why is that? Here's what I think. The problem is that the game is based off a movie plot. Okay, the game is a movie tie-in, that's awesome. However, it didn't give Insomniac the freedom to expand a lot more. Like, let's compare the other games, the originals. The stories felt better, they flowed a lot better. And it's due to the fact that those games were standalone. They didn't follow any movie plot. Insomniac Games had the chance to focus on the story and on the gameplay for the new game. Although the idea of the story is interesting, it just felt rushed. And why is that? It's because Insomniac Games was following a script. The story's script, the script of the movie. They focused on gameplay, and it shows, the gameplay's awesome. But it also feels like they tried to just squeeze in the story as much as they could. And in the end, the result wasn't that great. The game is awesome overall, I've said this many times, but the game feels like a source of advertisement. That's what it is. The game is telling us to go watch the movie, and if you watch the movie, you'll probably enjoy the story a lot more. You'll understand it better. A lot of fans enjoyed the movie, so there you have it. It felt like Insomniac Games was very limited, since you know they followed the movie's plot. When you're following a movie's plot, you have to make sure that the game doesn't move away from the story too much. And that's why the game felt a lot shorter. Insomniac Games didn't want to add in too much gameplay, cause you know, it would have made the game move away too much from the actual story. And this is what's hard about developing a game based off a movie. You feel very restricted, very limited, like you already have a plan in motion and you have to follow that. Knowing Insomniac Games, they don't follow a set of plans. They come up with ideas on the spot and write them down. I read this in an article a long time ago. For the new game, they had to follow a story that was already there. And that's why the end result felt different than what we usually have. And that's why the original story beats the new one. The original game was its own standalone thing. Insomniac Games had a lot more freedom. The story in that game flowed a lot better. The game was a lot longer, and the game didn't feel rushed. The story didn't feel rushed. Now, let's say the reimagining was not based off the movie. Do you think that the game would have been a lot better? Do you think that a lot of people would have given the game a 10 on 10? Probably. I would have given the game a 10 on 10 if the story didn't feel rushed and if the characters were implemented a lot better. For example, in my review, I talked about Dr. Nefarious, right? He felt so out of place. It felt like Insomniac Games just threw the guy in there as a boss battle. So what am I trying to say? If the game was not based off the movie, I think the game would have done a lot better. Even if the game was based off the movie, I think they still could have managed to implement the story a lot better. But still, if the new game were its own thing, I think it would have done a lot better, story-wise. Gameplay is awesome. Insomniac Games can do their own thing. They don't have to follow a movie's plot. A standalone game gives the players the chance to slowly progress through the story, to understand what's actually going on. And that's one of the main problems when making a game based off a movie. Alright, now what's going to happen to the Ratchet & Clank series? How is Insomniac going to continue the series? Are they going to continue with the sequel to the reimagining, or continue from after into the Nexus? Assuming there's not going to be a Ratchet & Clank movie sequel, I think the second reimagining will do a lot better, story-wise. And why? It's simple. Insomniac Games has a lot more freedom. They can come up with their own ideas and give players the chance to slowly progress through the story. No rush whatsoever. But if I were to choose, I'll have to go with a sequel to Into the Nexus. An actual, full-length, a Crack in Time style game. Like I said many times, guys, I enjoyed the new game, 8 on 10. But the way the story was presented, it just wasn't that great. I liked the idea of the story, however. Before I end the video, guys, I just want to talk about something different. The Sly Cooper movie is currently in development. Early stages, don't confuse in production. Development and production are not the same thing. However, what is Sony planning on doing with this series? Are we going to get a reimagining? A game based off the movie, just like Ratchet & Clank? No one knows, but if they do decide to go with that, I just hope that the story in that game doesn't feel rushed. Whoever decides to develop that game, whether it's Sucker Punch or Sanzaru, I just hope they take this into account. That's all I'm gonna say. But anyways, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you have any thoughts, as usual, leave them in the comments. I've been Vivi, and I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching.